and I'm here with my becoming really good friend, John Breen. It's only been probably about a month since John and I first connected, but um, here we are. So hopefully the live, I just saw the indicator come up, so maybe we're live now. I'll kick it off again. I'm Matthew here with my becoming good friend, John. John Breen, he's a master energy worker, and actually, I'm going to share a little bit of the story how John and I connected. It's only been about a month, and you guys know if you're tuning into this stuff, like just that soul connection, you instantly know the person, whether it's related to past life, whatever, who cares? But you can just feel that tangible energy with someone. That's definitely the say the connection that John and I have. Um, and it's funny, John connected with me on Facebook, and all he did a random swipe on his phone, stopped it, and my name happened to be the where it stopped, and he connected, and that was about a month ago, and here we are. And John, super gifted in his work. He has an interesting story. We might touch briefly on that, but we definitely want to get more to the meat of the coronavirus and how to help everyone who's watching, and really essential information for keeping your mindset and your physical body intact. But John, as many of you may know, my girlfriend Gail, she's going through cancer. It's been deemed terminal by our allopathic system. Of course, we all know that things can be reversed, nothing's set in stone. But John actually came down from his place. He lives about 20 minutes or 30 minutes north of where Gail is. And he came down and he did a session for her. And Gail was in like immense pain. She's doing a little better now. She's been in the hospital, and I'll go into that at the end of the call here. But, she was on the couch. She couldn't move. She was basically crawling to get upstairs. She was on crutches. Her left tibia was fractured, or the bone was compromised. She couldn't really move, and just constant pain. Very little times where she got relief. And John came over and worked on her for close to a couple hours. I think you were there, John, but the session itself was at least an hour and a half. And she felt zero pain the entire time. She was in a state of bliss, peace, which is phenomenal. Just because, she hadn't had that level of relief in weeks. So, when I bring someone on, expert talks, or I interview somebody, it's always coming from a place of my experience and knowing intuitively that they're a heart-centered person wanting to make the world a better place. And that's where we are today. That's what this is all about. Coronavirus, there's a lot of fear in the atmosphere, and, people go into survival mode, and that's kind of how we're built as humans. But of course, we have access to a higher level of awareness, a higher level of consciousness. And John is an expert on this, so he's going to be sharing his best insights into how we can stay peaceful, stay present, stay shielded from what's going on in the media, in the world, coronavirus, and other important topics. So without further ado, John, let's just kick it over to you. And maybe if you want to share a little bit about yourself, but let's get right into the coronavirus stuff as quickly as possible, too.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. It was great meeting you and meeting Gail. And I'm going to be doing some more work on Gail, so I'm really looking forward to that. Just a brief, I didn't believe in energy work at all. Let's just start with that. I was about as far away from it as you could possibly imagine. And as you know, life will turn and twist you in all different directions. And you never know really where it's going to go, because it seems like you're not in control. It just kind of brings you where you're going to go. And then in hindsight, sometimes when you look back, you realize that all of these dots are connected, but you have to go through these dots. So for myself, I started doing energy work in 2005. And me and my wife bought an old house. Very briefly, we bought it. And things were happening in the house that you really can't explain. Like it wasn't like it wasn't like of this world, let's say. It was stuff that you couldn't put your finger on. And it's interesting enough that when you go through an experience like that, you think like on the movies that you're going to run out the house screaming your head off. But the logical mind says, hang on a second, I'm paying a mortgage. I don't get what's going on. So you stay there and like as I said, you think, and I'd say to my wife, did you see that? What's going on here? So you go through this whole journey. You go this whole journey of accepting things that you would never accepted before, and it's almost given to you in small pieces. And then you start to question yourself, well, what else is there? And then you get into the quantum world. And then you get into meeting all different teachers. You seem to attract, you come across books, videos, and you go on this whole, I guess, landscape of learning about who you are or who you're not, to be honest with you. So we went through that whole thing, and I started to practice. And in my opinion, I think the health is fantastic, like what we're doing, what doctors and nurses are doing. Don't get me wrong. But that's a taught thing, you see. And when I'm working on someone, it's like I take away the straw of a human perspective. So in my opinion, after doing it for all these years, and I'm not dogging on doctors or nurses, that's not what I'm doing. Let me be clear about that. But when I'm working on someone, I find that I'm kind of looking through a straw at health. But when you start to work on people, you start thinking as a human being. You flip the straw away, and you soon realize the aperture of information that you have is growing exponentially. And the things that you thought could never really happen or manifest in front of you actually do.
Yeah, that's so phenomenal. Yeah, I just to touch on that. I mean, our mind, our spirit, infinite possibilities. Are those the tattoos you have on your arms? Infinite possibilities. Yeah. And I mean that as we tap into that power, obviously we have to be open-minded, but and I know you're going to touch on this, but from my perspective, that's what the coronavirus is a stimulant for. And we always have the ability to view everything from a positive perspective. And positive just means holistic. We can see the big picture. We can see how our future is intact. This isn't Armageddon. It's not the end of the world. Humans dramatize things. That's why we go to war in the past and things like that. But now this is a time where obviously the virus is bringing people together. Kindness, compassion, connection, for our fellow man. Yeah, the way humans tend to learn is through turbulent times, rather than, let's just have peace on earth. Eventually we'll get there, right? But so yeah, please, let's just dive into that, John, in terms of why do you think coronavirus is happening now and what's its significance to humanity?
Well, what I would like to touch on is it seems to be everyone is programmed with this thing here. And this is like a microphone. You can't blame it for swearing, okay? It's just a medium. But it seems to me that when people get up in the morning, because we're getting inundated with information constantly, some true, some maybe not, I'm really not sure, But what I can tell you is right now, in this time frame, I don't believe this is doing us a favor. I really don't. Because we are looking at this, and what's happened is, to give you an example, you would look and you would get a message or there'd be something happening. Because it's worldwide, it's not just one country that's transmitting what they found or any of that stuff. Everyone. So it's getting bombarded. And of course, fear steps in, right? Infection, fear, infection, it's kind of the same thing as I see it. And what I have learned through working on people for many years is that our cells are programmable. Okay, these cells in your body, everyone's body, are programmable. So now, if you understand that, and then you're constantly picking up your phone every hour. Now, it could be now what's going to happen is it's from the news media, and then your family will react, are you okay? So no one's listening to the classic albums, no one's getting on with their regular day because we're being bombarded. But the crazy thing is that we are programming ourselves every time. And trauma, it's getting in ourselves. And how do I know this? Because when I work on someone, I deprogram the cells, right? Because that's how you react. You deprogram the cells and you bring in higher frequencies to the cells. Let's say concepts that will serve them, any of this type of stuff. And then when you look, so then if you think about, you have each individual and they're getting the cells programmed by your friend here. then you look at you, I, and everyone who's on board watching us today in the planet. We are all cells in the body of humanity. So what happens then is you turn into dis-ease, disease. It's two words, as you know. So now humanity as a whole has dis-ease. And then you bring in, let's say, G5. G5.
Or five Gs. 5G.
Sorry, 5G.
Yep.
Can you tell I'm dyslexic, right? It will lower your frequency, because we're all frequency beings. Everything's a frequency, right? So once again, when you control the ocean, you control the fish. Okay, so we're in a time frame right now where the media, in my opinion, I just don't think it's healthy to be hanging off your phone, because you are constantly programming yourselves all the time. Humanity is being programmed. And then you've got 5G, which is lowering your immune system also. So I think that we should be mindful of picking off and hanging off our phones. Right now, what's going to happen is going to happen. I don't know. I don't have a crystal. I don't know. But all I know, I don't see that as the answer. And I think that the further we stay away from this little fella here, I think the better we'd be off. Be better off. And then what we want to be a human being, not just a human, right? So because we're kind of segregating ourselves, our true nature is to shake hand and is to touch, and this is getting less and less, of course, because of the virus. And I understand that, but we just have to be mindful of the bigger picture.
Yeah. So that's really great information, and it's worth emphasizing some of those points. So number one, the media obviously can serve a great purpose to keep people informed, but it's a business, right? It's a business. It goes overboard, right? And it's well known, the phrase, if it bleeds, it leads. I've heard firsthand from journalists and people working in the media that they will show the worst things because that gets engagement, right? It's all about engagement, just like social media. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, right? Is that empowering for people? Not necessarily, but there's no right or wrong here. It's just our choices. But as humans with free will, we have the choice what we tune into, what we listen to, what we take counsel from. And obviously, the younger generation, like your generation, John, my generation and younger, we're less and less reliant on the formal media. Whereas, your parents' age, Gail's parents, like not all of them, but they're more inclined to listen to the news and believe it because that's what they grew up in, and they don't understand the internet or Google or whatever.
Yep.
But I think it's important to say, hey, if you want to check in on the news to see what's going on, whatever, that's fine, but take it with a grain of salt, because you're not getting the full facts. Like, unless you're on the ground where it's happening, and even then you're still conditioned to your own human perception, right? So the fact is, we don't really know what's going on. It's been called a world pandemic. The World Health Organization, governing bodies, it's in several countries. But let's also go back to our own experience. Like, what are we doing daily? And I know we're going to get into this with the practice, because for as many thousands of cases as there are, there's billions of people that are doing okay during this time. So what the media does is it takes the focus off what's working, what's positive, and it wants to focus on the one tiny problem. And again, nothing wrong with that. But when humanity starts focusing on that one tiny problem, it grows, because where you focus, your energy goes. So let's maybe actually let me touch on two key points you made there. Humans are like cells on the planet. I thought that was really key. Just like we have trillions of cells in our body, and there's electricity flowing through all of them, and we got to maintain that. And we're going to talk about water and conditioning our mind and body in a bit here. But it's like a mirror for the planet, right? So the better we have our mindset and our body, we're conditioning the planet to become our paradise reality where we prefer to live. And the other point you made, and this isn't a topic of like conspiracy or control or anything like that. Again, that could be fiction, could be fact. We have no way of knowing unless we're living it. But you made the point of, if you control the ocean, you control the fish, which I think is really important, because there's so many different frequencies going through the air these days.
That's right.
Cell phones, 5G, EMFs, and if you're coming from a victim fear-mongering place, you'd be like, holy crap, these things are going to like kill me or fry my brain or something. Of course, that's not the case. Human consciousness has the ability to transcend anything that we create that is not conducive to good health. Our mind can adapt to it and grow beyond it. And that's part of the conversation here. But the idea here is too, how do we kind of maintain our sovereignty, knowing that there may be elements out there that are not for our best and highest good, that they're created out of, whether it's greed, control, fear, whatever it is, doesn't matter why it was created, because ultimately when we balance ourselves, everything becomes neutral. But how can we reset to that, John? How can we reset to that neutral mindset where we're no longer a victim of the external world and we have full empowerment in ourselves?
Okay. I think, the most valuablest thing that we have, it's a couple of things, is our emotions, right? Our emotions are so powerful. And I'd like anyone to listen to, there's a couple of key points that I'm not a specialist on, I just know what I've experienced. Like, there's lots of stuff out there on 5G. I recommend anyone to be informed of the millimeter waves of 5G. I could go on. It was used as a weapon in the Second World War. You could go on about stuff, but I won't get into that, because I feel I'm not a specialist in that. So I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that could kind of fill that in. But what I can say, when you mention the word sovereign, we should be sovereign. We should be sovereign. And how are you not sovereign? You are not sovereign right now. Trauma. So you're going through your life. Trauma sets in your life. Something happens, any type of trauma, and then you're gonna have what's called attachments, energetic parasites. Now, what these things do. Now, anyone who's not used to hearing this information, please do your research. I've been in this field for quite a number of years, and I'll just tell you my experience. And more often than not, I'm pulling attachments off people. Now, I'm just going to try and see how I can express this. Attachments are energetic parasites, and what they do, they feed off human emotions. Okay, so let's say you have a trauma like now, so everyone is in fear. So what happens then? They're being fed off. They're being fed off. Please do your research on all of this stuff. They could probably explain it better than me. So they'll feed off you. So you are no longer sovereign. They can be in your body. A lot of them will hang around in your stomach. They will hang around under your feet. And someone could say to me, well, you know what, John? Where are they? I don't see them. But once again, it opens up another conversation. Say, well, you know what? If I had a fan on the table right here, and I had it on low, and you see the fan go around, you can see the fan. But when you put the fan on high, the speed at which it's vibrating, oscillating, moving, is disappeared. So we understand that our eyes can only, perception of our eyes, the aperture of the speed, we can only pick up. So you have to understand there's a lot more going on to this puzzle than you can possibly imagine. You see. So when I talk about energetic parasites, very, very real. Now, I don't want to fear anyone when I say this. As I'm telling you this information, I am saying this from a position of be informed, but don't be in fear. Because if I don't say this, that's a big part of this. It's a big part, and I'm just basically saying, so you can't walk around saying, oh, I've got a parasite. Everyone all over the place has these things. And please do your research. You've lived with them for a long time, but all I'm trying to say is be sovereign. So I have to mention this to say it's important to be sovereign. Because I pull these things off people, they feel lighter, they feel better, the thought patterns are more clearer, and they can also hold on a cellular level. I've pulled them off people, and it showed itself on a human perspective as arthritis. They will also influence people to make decisions, poor decisions. They can push you in a way that will have you addicted to certain things in life that you generally wouldn't make these decisions. And I know, like I said, I know some of this sounds hokey, folks, but at a time like this, I wouldn't be wasting my breath on saying this because it is time sensitive and people have to be on board with this. I've worked on anxiety, depression, borderline personality disorder. It goes on and on and on and on. So here's where I'm going with this is your human emotions. In a time like this, respect your human emotions. Don't purge them all over the place. They're extremely valuable. And getting back to my point, when we're constantly programming ourselves with this little fella, right? They're feeding. When you go into anxiety and depression, they're feeding that. It's been like this for many thousands of years. So, and it's nothing for me to pull 3, 4, 5 energies off a person. And when you go to get them, they'll run through the body. Like I'll be at the head, and there's the feet. And you go to the feet, and they'll run down to the head. And the person I'm working on will feel this, and they can sense everything. So they're going to know to scan the body, and it's going to be on the shoulder. And I go to the shoulder, and they run behind the head. And the St. John's one behind me. So they're tuned in. So then we do a clearing. And now you have more of the real state of your spirit back, of your soul, of your sense of I am who I am power, getting back to position of being self. Right?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I mean, this parallels a lot of the spiritual work that I've done in terms of really removing the blocks, the awareness of source power. And when we remove these negative energies, like we don't have to do anything to be whole. What we have to do is remove the blocks that are keeping us from our awareness that we are whole. That's kind of a fundamental idea in spirituality. And I've certainly had experiences with that. And it's pretty outstanding, kind of the miracles that can transpire when you really tap into this stuff. And it's fascinating to me because I kind of grew up in terms of my spiritual understanding going back 10 years or so with A Course in Miracles. And A Course in Miracles discusses the idea of source power, which is our natural state where we're healthy in mind and body and connected to our spiritual nature. And then it has the ego, where it's the survival mechanism where we cut off from our source power. And A Course in Miracles discusses it from a very artistic, larger perspective. So it's sometimes difficult to interpret into your practical life. But what you're saying here is very practical, and it sounds like these energies running through the body are kind of a derivative of that ego survival mechanism. And they keep us, away from our source power. They keep kind of the door shut on that. There's probably a whole conversation we can have at a later time when things are a little more restful for humanity about why this happened and, how we can really transcend to the idea of enlightenment. But right now, it's essential just to accept, hey, whatever it is, there's something going on. If you're in fear mode, right? If you're feeling scarcity, if you're feeling lack, that means there's something going on in your system that is out of alignment with the source power. And, the simple analogy I like for source power is like, hey, if you want to have toast for breakfast in the morning and you got your toaster, you have to plug it into the outlet. Otherwise, you have no power. And as as being in a human body, we always have some degree of power running through our system. Otherwise, we wouldn't be alive. But how much more can we access? Just like, using that analogy of the ocean again. Well, on one level, it seems like there might be, people controlling the ocean. But then there's another level above that where we realize, hey, maybe we're controlling this whole thing. Right. And even the aspect, which I'll touch briefly on here, like in some senses, it's like a dream reality. It's malleable, right? Things in here aren't set in stone. They're changeable. And maybe we're creating this entire experience for our own growth and evolution and, things derived from that idea. And if that's a fact, then we actually control the ocean with our mind and how we focus.
Correct.
And so bringing that power back and realizing, wait a second, if I work with someone like John or I take on some of these recommendations that we're going to get more specifically into, I can start to regain that control and realize I am the projector booth of the movie, and I can change that movie at my will, or at least start to increase my faith and trust that that's a possibility.
Yeah, and I think, and it's also, I think perception, you see, here's the thing, when you're led by perception, by media. Now, like I said, media is, it's not good or bad, it just all depends on where it's going. And because you're blasted with it right now, because there's huge amounts of clickbait out there, right? And so it's really gathered a lot of momentum, you know? And now we're starting to make time our enemy, because no matter what we're doing in our day, we're in that fight or flight. So we've made time our enemy. So when you're constantly, stuck in that frequency of fear, you're not tasting your food. You're not going for a walk in the forest. You're not doing this. You're not doing that, because think of time, okay, as that water, as that glass. So no matter what else, whatever you put in it, it's gonna taste terrible. So it's the perception. I just feel like we're being led. I think that we're being led, because much like you said, life can be malleable, but wherever the camera goes, we follow the camera, our perception does. So we have to be mindful of that, because we have our own personal power, and we just got to tap into it. You wouldn't believe, I cannot say this strong enough or loud enough. If each individual, every human being, right, knew how incredibly powerful we were, it would blow your mind. You'd say, how can I even fit in this body? Because what I do when I work on people, I'll take them out of the body and I'll do all different things and so on and so forth. And I'll put them back, and they're like, it just seems so constricted and so small. So, folks, even when you're going through stuff, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, and you'll hear it from me, and as you do your research, please do. You are absolutely incredible, and you have all of the answers. Think of your life as a thread, right? So you're going along your thread of life, let's say. And the truth of it is that we can look for answers, and it's great and it's good. But you got to have your own answer. You got to go inside. Go inside and look at the mechanics of what you've been through. You can work this out, because when you get in that mode of seeking and looking, what you're really saying, when you do it too much, you're saying, I'm not enough. You're saying, I don't have the answer. So when you're constantly on YouTube, when you're constantly doing so much, it can actually work against you. For sure. I've seen it. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, life's obviously all about balance. And we have the power of choice, what we're going to focus on here. So I think, like the phone can be a wonderful connection device, right?
Absolutely.
Everything's neutral, and it's a matter of what we're using it for. And when we decide to say, hey, you know what, the media has its place, but maybe it's more practical to talk to real people on the ground with experience. That's kind of a general statement here. But that's how I get my information more than anything, is just I talk to real people who are doing real things. And then I know at least I have some semblance of the truth. Again, what is the complete picture? We don't really know, but we can figure out what we need to know in any given moment to move forward with our lives. And I think that's one of the critical ideas that you're talking about here, is when we're in a place of fear, we can't really move forward with our lives because we're stuck. And it's killing us. It's literally killing us. Stress. I think I'm not an expert on stress in this regard, but I'm pretty sure what authorities say it's the number one killer is stress, right? It leads to all forms of disease. So, if we say, hey, wait a second, the only thing causing me stress really is my perception of the situation. There's nothing factual about the media. That's important to just establish for ourselves right now. There's nothing factual about it. It's people reporting ideas with an agenda to instill. I'm not even going to say with an agenda to instill fear, because that may not be the intention. It's to instill engagement. They want engagement, right? They're a business. They want people engaged. If their medium for engagement is fear, then that's what they're using. At least that's traditionally how they've done things. So when we say, hey, wait a sec, I'm going to unplug from that, and be my own vessel and be my own sovereign system, and develop a network of 10 or 20 really great people and stay in touch with them and get my information from my own network, suddenly we're creating our own community, and that can become our own economy. That can become our own source of health and wellness. That becomes our own source of relationships and connection. And I think, if anything, the coronavirus is going to instill that for people. And there's the whole element of karma at play here, right? Like, if it's your time to go, it's your time to go. From my perspective, anyway, that's how it
Yes,
works.
I agree.
People
I
don't
agree.
have to believe that, but you and I think, are on the same page. So, if we look at it from a karmic perspective and like, hey, the script is written, like what's going to happen here is going to happen here, right? So, in some senses, it's already happened, and we're just playing out the movie, right?
We're just filling in the content, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, hey, let's step back a second, and I'm not saying this is easy. It's relatively simple, but if you've conditioned your mind to run on fear, I mean, this is something I struggled with my whole life. Then you got to check yourself, right? And then when you do check, though, then you're like, wait a second, is this coming from my higher being, or is this coming from the ego, from survival, from fear? And that's kind of the starting point. Maybe that's a good segue for you, John, to go into, maybe touch on that, but also, let's talk about the water. Let's talk about the meditation, how we can center ourselves to look at life through that perspective.
Sure. Okay. So, of course, on a positive note, and as I'm talking now, I don't want to put anyone any paralysis. I don't want to make them like fearful. There's enough of that. That's not what we've agreed to meet here and spread our experiences. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was on I went on Facebook, and I was like, oh my God! And there was this one lady, and her name is Ruby Powers, and she would post at 11 o'clock in the morning every day. She would post something. Really nice girl. I never really met her, really, to be honest with you. It was just so I just connected to her, and I phoned her and I said, look, I says, tell me how you feel about this. I said, Ruby, I said, let's it says the way I see it, see, we have to connect, because in this reality, all the doors are kind of closed. There's a lot of doors that are closed. And I thought, well, is the answer to the solution on the third dimension in this reality that we see? And I'm like, well, maybe it is, but I know from experience that once we get out of the third dimension, where there is no time and there is no space, there is infinite possibilities. I know that I've experienced this for many, many, many years on people. So I know this exists. So I'm thinking, okay, so how can humanity get outside of 3D to assist in connecting to the bigger part of who they are? And I suggested this to Ruby, and I said, Ruby, what do you think about that? She said, I think it'd be great. I said, well, what time do you think we should do this for? Like an hour a day. So basically, she said, look, why don't we do it at 555? And I said, that'd be great. I said, so like basically, we're not using Zoom, we're not using any media whatsoever. It's just there is no responsibility. It's just a calling. Let's say an inner calling to say, you know what? I can sit down for an hour on this planet. I've been on this planet. I've been using stuff. It supported me for all of my life. And I'm saying, in this time of need, would it be possible to take an hour out of your day and just sit down with no distractions? Because not only are you helping the planet, of course, you're part of the planet. There's no separation. We know that, right? So all I'm saying is sit down for 1 hour, starting at 555. If you can give an hour, and you might for every day, but that doesn't mean every day. It means you can join us when you can and when you can't, because life is all over the place, right? But be mindful of that. If you can give an hour just to sit, and you don't have to be a great meditator. I'm not a great meditator. I've tried. I'm not good at it. This whole thing, like this perception of meditation, all I'm saying is sit down and just relax with no distractions, no phone, no nothing. If you want to put on some gentle music and just allow yourself to send love, just be that to the planet. And I honestly feel if we do that, this will help tremendously. I really, really do. They did experiments. I always remember Bruce Lipton. You're familiar with Bruce Lipton? So Bruce Lipton talks about this. Biology of Belief is a book that he co-wrote with someone. And he goes on to talk about a social experiment they did years ago. And they did this experiment, and they got a gang of people. And they said, "Let's do this." And I think it was focused on New York City, let's say. And after they did that, I don't know, I can't remember the details. It was an hour or 2 hours. I really can't remember. It was a long time since I'd been engaged with the book. But I will say this: when they did that, and when they focused their energy through meditation and through mindfulness, crime rate was down. Everything that you could possibly imagine that was negative fell down. And they went through all of the paperwork, all of the data, and sure enough, it all went down. It got me thinking. I thought, you know what? Maybe that's where the answer is. Maybe if we all connect and just chill and just push all of this media, all of these distractions. Like I said, you've got the key and you're connected always. But let's open up the aperture of this connection, because I believe that's where the answer is myself. Because like I said, we're being isolated, we're being separated. What we talk about on social media, in my opinion, is all monitored, of course. So to stay away from all of that and just be a human being, not human being, that's very important. Being now, being present.
Yeah, that's important. So, being, right? Just as you're watching, as you're listening, think of that word being. What does it mean? Right? Tapping into that power, tapping into the idea of peace and presence, right? Humans get a lot caught up in thinking, in doing, in having, external material things. Nothing wrong with any of that. But this coronavirus is giving us the opportunity to go inside and say, hey, wait a second, maybe my priorities are out of order. In fact, we know, for the fact that this is happening, we know our priorities as a global system have been out of order, because when we are fully in balance and peace, this stuff won't happen. That's just how it works. Now, you can say, hey, how the heck do you know that, Matthew? Whatever. That's my belief. That's my perception based on things like Bruce Lipton, etc. I've read that book. Phenomenal. I vaguely recall that story as well. But there's so many other accounts of that happening in little small town experiments or whatever. So, and Albert Einstein said, so I'll paraphrase here, the idea of the level of consciousness that created a problem at this level has to be solved with a higher level of awareness, a higher level of consciousness. It kind of makes sense. I mean, 2 + 2 = 4. So 4 is greater than the problem. The problem's 2 + 2. That's 2 separate parts. And then the whole is 4. That's like a higher number, right? So, that's maybe a crude analogy, but I think you guys get the point. Is like, if you want the solution, don't look where the problem is. Let go of the problem, right? And this is actually a practical time to get into this. As we get into meditation, our ability to let go of fear, let go of the negative emotions increases. Our resilience increases. Our ability to cope with stress increases. And I'll just throw in here, because we're going to talk a little bit about water, but even breathing, like, it's up to you how you want to do your meditation. Personally, I'm a fan of the Wim Hof breathing and the cold showers, because it's a great way to de-stress. And you want to make sure that, when you're doing something like that, that you're always having the right mindset, right? Like, don't become dependent on your breathing to feel better. Don't become dependent on the cold showers to feel better, but they can be a great permission slip to get you into that mindset. The ultimate power, from my perspective, is just letting go of the negativity. And that's a training. You have to train yourself to do that. But we all have that muscle, right? Like, if I'm holding onto this pen with a clenched fist, I can let go. And when I let go, I'm more relaxed, right? So you can do that with your emotions as well. And maybe that's something we can dive deeper into later, but you can also do some research around that, how to let go and release. And there's a lot of different methodologies around that. But bring it back to being, right? You want to get in that state of let beingness take over for you. Let the power of surrender to the higher power, to God, to the source power. The more we let that into ourselves and our mind and our body and our heart, things really do start to take care of themselves. And if you're hearing this for the first time, that's going to sound, wacko, because it's like, no, I have to be a warrior. I have to, it's all about the result. It's all about moving forward. And sure, that process can work, but it also causes a tremendous amount of stress on our systems. And, it does kill us, right? Stress is the number one killer. But if you're more like a wizard, if you're more like, hey, I'm going to focus on my being and realize that, physical reality, as tangible as it is, it's also malleable and it can change. Then now we're starting to restore some of that power. So maybe touch on water a bit here too, John, and how that can facilitate some of this cleansing and clearing, etc.
Yeah, well, I'll just before we go on, you made an interesting point, and I've said this when I work on people. It's interesting because he did this, and it was this, right? And like this, a cleansed fish is defense, and it's power, and it's all of this. But the real power, folks, and I said this when I work on people, and I mean, imagine that's your stomach. I got a knot in my stomach, right? So, it's no surprise to me, colitis, ulcerated bowel, and all this stuff. All of this seems to be happening because people are not processing, right? They're not processing anything. They're being inundated with information. And of course, inundated with information on a physical form is very often the stomach, right? That's where you process on a physical way. Let me get back to the hand for a second. Folks, this is not power. It is not power. This is power. This is saying, I don't know what's going to happen, but guess what? I'll deal with it. That's all I did my whole life. The content will change moving forward, but isn't that what you did behind you? You didn't have a map. No one had a map, right? So this is like, just go look. I honestly believe that no matter what's happening here, you're going to be exactly where you need to be at any given time. So when you have this mentality, am I supposed to be here? Then you run over here. Am I supposed to be there? I'll move over here. Am I supposed to be there? I might be missing out. Maybe I'm over here. Just relax and just be wherever you are. That to me is empowerment. That to me, when I work on someone, they surrender themselves. When I work on them, not to me, but to themselves. And that the amount of power that comes from that is immeasurable. And also, when you were talking about thinking outside the box is the solution right now. All the answers, I feel from my position, all the answers are outside the box. So this narrative that we use, our society and so on and so forth, that to me, we can pick and we can move around. But once again, as you've discussed, I do believe it's on the outside. So getting to water, Dr. Emoto, I think I was going to bring up Dr. Emoto. Well, of course, so this water here is programmable. Folks, if you don't know this, look up Dr. Emoto. I understand he's got quite a few, he's dead now, isn't he? But he's got quite a few books out, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
Good. Well documented Japanese scientist. And what he's proven, folks, is that this in my hand is programmable. And you could say, well, what do you mean programmable? I mean, okay, I'll give you a rough analogy very quickly of an experiment that he did. So you got a beacon of water. And he had 2 beacons of water, and he poured water into them. And this one, he told the water that it was beautiful and it gave life and it was harmonious to the planet. And then he froze it. And this one here, he told it was demonic, it was horrible, it was disgusting, so on. So it was all very negative words, and he froze the both of them, and I know micrometer thin, I don't know, he sliced them, and then when he looked under a microscope, he saw sacred geometry of this thing that was told it was going to give him so much love, so much life. It was symmetrical, it was balanced, like a snowflake. Think of a snowflake. And it was all balanced, and it was just beautiful. And then he looked at stuff that told it was demonic and on all these extremely negative things, and all these water molecules were completely distorted. So I guess where I'm going with this, folks, is we have so much water in our body. So respect the fact that we have so much water in our body, once again, getting back to the whole programming thing. And we can program this water before we drink it too. It's well documented. Please do whatever research you do, keep it centralized. Because a lot of people, Matthew, would you say a lot of people would know about this, or do you think it's? I don't think it's on the outside, is it? Do you think it's?
Well, I mean, this is definitely in little bubble realities, and that's another point I was going to make is, number one, if you're watching this, and you don't have to believe any of it. This isn't designed to be that, right? It's not dogma. It's like, hey, if certain elements resonate with you, then try it. I'm a big believer in, experimenting with things that can possibly help you. And that just requires open-mindedness. From my perspective, it's probably, like 1 or 2, definitely less than 10% of the population that kind of has an understanding of these things. But it's well known that we're 70, 80, 90% water in our bodies. And if we've got all these frequencies flying through the air, just like radio waves and cell phone waves, that's going to affect. But if we do our job to maintain our sovereignty with our thinking and our vibration, it's going to overpower that. And it takes training, right? Someone might ask, like, hey, Matthew and John, it's all well and good that if I say that I love myself, or I love my cells, or I love my water, that's going to start to reprogram me. But, it's hard. I try it and then I fall back. And that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with, falling forward here, because that's really, I've been on this journey for at least a decade, and I came, from an immense amount of negative program, right? Just as so many of us have, and so many people have come from more trauma than me, but I've, had my fair share of experiences. And, you have to be determined. You have to say, look, happiness and living in a fearless state is more important to me than anything. And the moment you make that decision, all the work you put in will become that much easier, and it will start to flow. And we're in a time now where it's accelerated, right?
Yeah.
And if you also look at the process of mastery, like, for example, think of your favorite sport, like golf, something that I learned early on. And learning golf is incredibly difficult, right? Like, there are so many subtle nuances to it. Training your mind for positive thinking is not as hard as learning golf. So if you have a favorite sport that you've, semi-mastered or really enjoy, just go through the same process in training your mind to be happy, right? Because, the way our lizard brain, it's in there, it's helpful under certain circumstances. And again, that's probably another whole conversation we could have as to why it's there and how it got there. But, when you do have that fearful thought, you got to say, wait a second, even if it's true, even if it is true, which it's never true because it's perception, but even if it was true, if it's not empowering, just wait a second, is there something better I can think about, right? For me, the idea of affirmations play a big role in this too. There's a special process in order to utilize them effectively, which, don't have time to fully go into here, but, I'm awake, I'm powerful, I'm free. When you think these things and you truly allow yourself to surrender to them and believe them and feel them in your cells, that's when you're reprogramming yourself, because you can feel it, right? When you feel it, that's when you're on the right track. And then the moment you get that taste of like, hey, I feel a little better, and I did that myself based on my thinking or based on the water, the meditation, now you're starting to take your power back. And now you just have to do that more often. And don't get me wrong, you're probably going to get resistance. Your ego mind doesn't want that because it hasn't been programmed for that. It doesn't understand stepping into the unknown. It wants to stay in its comfort zone, even if that means it's going to die. It would rather die than change. That's the way the ego is programmed. But we can say, wait a second, I'm not fighting with the ego here. I'm giving it reassurance. I'm saying, wait, ego, thank you for showing up. Thank you, just like a worried mother. Thank you for, I know I need to eat. I know I need to sleep. I know. But here's why I can reassure you, right? Because I'm connected to spirit, because I'm powerful, because I'm creating my reality, because I have a support system, because through social media, I have people like John and Matthew in my life. And then you start to bring your power back. So I think that's just mission critical right now. But also, coming back to you, John, this is your gift to allow that process, to facilitate that process for people so it's easier and faster through your energy work, through your healing sessions. So let's hear a little bit about that from you.
Well, just if I could just briefly talk about. So here we are in our homes, and you know what, we might be confined, like as you know, Italy have and so on and so forth. But do yourself a favor. Use that time wisely, your emotions and stuff like that. But the worst thing you can do is procrastinate, because then you get mad at yourself for procrastinating. You're looking at the same four walls. Nothing is changing. And once again, then you get mad at yourself. This whole thing perpetuates itself. So when you get up, just organize the closet. Do this, do that. Just keep busy. Control what you can control. Don't fall into the trap. Because here's what happens is you don't do, and you get mad at yourself, and then that whole energetic thing starts to build. So just be mindful of this as we go through. Sorry about that. So what was your question again?
Yeah, no, these are great points, and obviously this is organic. I just throw stuff out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, no, that's great.
Along, but
Yeah.
you made two good points here actually that I want to touch on first, and then we'll get into the healing sessions and how people can help themselves with your assistance. But two things. Number one, doesn't matter what's going on in the world. We always have the ability to create our own bubble realities. And when enough of us get together and talk about this stuff, it starts to permeate our consciousness. The more of us doing it, the better. If you can get involved in, a group of like 100 people, and you kind of got a little community going on, not a cult, but a little community where you're talking about this stuff and encouraging one another, that's going to be tremendously helpful at this time. And I think more so than ever before, because, we have this quote unquote threat of coronavirus, not a threat. We created it with our own consciousness to wake us up to the next level of beingness. Okay, that's important to understand. But along the journey, you're going to get into this stuff. I've been on this path for some time. John has. And once you start to understand what to do, you're going to go off track at times, because that ego mind's going to kick in. The fear's going to kick in, and you'll have your moments, and that's perfectly natural. But as John was saying, don't beat yourself up with that, right? Because that's just the ego again pounding you, right? So hey, look, I'm off track, whatever. Things didn't go as scheduled, whatever. Things weren't perfect, whatever. It's okay.
Yeah, it's true. I always remember my Uncle Kenny in Liverpool, and he gave me some really good advice. And here's what he said. I used to beat myself up profusely, low self-esteem and all that. And he looked at me and he said, John, he said, what are you beating yourself up for? Every time I see you, you're always doing it. And it was like a mantra to me. It was like I deserved it, or who knows why, all of these stories, right? And he said, look, he says, there'll be enough people who'll do that behind your back without you doing it to yourself. He says, and he just says, it's done. You don't have to do it. There'll be enough people out there, right? And as soon as he said that, I dropped that whole facade, right? And so I guess, and getting back to another point, if I could, is you were not your experience. If I said to you, Matthew, if you text me, or you phone me and you said, John, I go, yeah, what's up? And you said, would you drop me off at the airport? I'm going away for 6 months. And I use this quite often when I'm working on people, because it's a phenomenal analogy. And you said, could you drop me off at the Toronto airport? You'd say, I'm going away for Europe for 6 months. And I'd say, yeah, okay, that's on, no problem. So I come, we put the bags in my car, we go to the terminal in Toronto, and you get on the plane and you go. So you're away for 6 months. And I got a message from you saying, John, I'm back. I'm not going to be at the airport. Would you mind picking me up? So I say, okay. So I text back over, and I say, yeah, that sounds great. I said, I'll be there, no problem. I'll take care of it. So, I get there, I park up the car. I go down the escalators, all that song and dance, and I'm waiting there. So you get off the plane, get your bags, you're going through customs, and you got all of the people that are waiting there, and you got the sliding doors when you come through. So you come through, and I say to you, Matthew, Spain, Italy, France, Belgium. And you go, what? You go, yeah, Matthew, Italy, France, Belgium, United Kingdom, Paris. You go, what are you talking about? You'd say, I'm Matthew. And I go, what? you're Matthew. You're not the places that you've been. You are not your experiences. And you would say, no, John. You'd say, I've been there. I've traveled it. I am separate from my experience. And I would say, oh. And you would say, really? I go, yes. You'd say, yes. And I would say, well, so let's take that 6 months and let's bring it back to, let's say, point zero when you were born. And let's say, okay, so everything that you've traveled through your thread of life has never, ever been your experience. You were always separate from it. So when you go through trauma, when you go through things in your life, be mindful of this as we go through this experience of life. You are not and never have been your experience. And that is how you stay sovereign. Does that make sense?
That's key. Yeah, just let that sink in for everyone watching, right? How do you stay sovereign? By letting go of your experiences, by understanding, hey, I want the experiences, that's why we're here, but I don't have to identify with them. Right? I don't have to identify with my past. I don't have to identify with my thoughts about the future. I just bring back to here, I'm Matthew, I'm John, I'm whoever. And it's in this moment where the past and the future is created anyway, because it's all perception. So if you're saying, wait a sec, okay, maybe I had certain experiences in the past, maybe there's things to be resolved too. And that's another topic of conversation that we can go deeper into at some time. But if you have things to resolve, people to stand up to, people that caused you fear, people that you victimized, and there's an opportunity to apologize or confront in a positive way, then look, it's a good time to look at that stuff too. Take an audit of what's going on in your system, because I don't want to get too personal here, but I had a realization, a lot of fear I was carrying, in the past with certain people, and I just I realized, wait a sec, I wrote them a note, sent it, and said, hey, I had all this fear going on, for whatever reasons, but now I want to share with you what was happening, and it released. It was gone because I confronted it in a positive, constructive way, and I didn't die. I felt like I might when I was doing it, but I didn't. and so that's just kind of a personal example of how that worked for me. But when we look at our greatest fears and we realize that they're perceptions, and then we do some kind of permission slip activity to let that go, whatever that is. And if you have personal questions about this stuff, John's going to be here for you. We're going to get into that a little bit more. By all means, reach out to me as well. Like, we're all here to help one another. But letting go of that fear is what's going to get you access to the source power, and that's going to automatically heal your mind, heal your body, etc.
Yeah, it's all outside the box stuff. It's interesting. You can start to reset, because I told you about your cells can be reprogrammed. When I work on someone, and I've got a friend of mine sitting here today, and he had celiac disease. Okay, and it's gone. It's documented. It's gone, right? It's gone. Like the access is there, folks. The access is there. A couple of days ago, I did work on a liver, and it was the abscess was the size of it was described to me as a grapefruit, and she couldn't feel it when it had gone. Now, believe me, folks, and I'm telling you this, there is no currency that I have in my being by saying that to food. And how do you do that? You do that by, you already have the answer, you're just deprogramming what you can't do. There's a huge component there. Can you talk to that? When you agree, Matthew?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think it might have cut out there a little bit. So just to kind of go back to it, I mean, first and foremost, celiac, and then like, those are major situations, and the fact that you're bringing like proof, like this stuff works, right? Like, physical ailments can be healed, disappeared, let go of, whatever. That's important to emphasize. And the second component there is, I mean, what comes to my mind as you're talking is like the idea of getting out of your own way and really allowing allowing the vessel of our body to be what it can naturally be when we let go of the fear and the stress and the attachments as you work on. Now, maybe can you just that second half, because after it, after you gave the two healing examples, it cut out a little bit. So can you just say that again, John?
Sorry, you want examples of the
Yeah,
possibility?
so you gave us the celiac example, you gave us the liver example, then the video on your end cut out a little bit. So I just think I
Oh,
know
okay,
you
sorry.
said something really
Yeah,
essential there. So just bring that back to the
yeah. Okay, so I've discussed about getting rid of the straw, and when we first started getting rid of the straw, of looking at possibilities, and I've also discussed the fact that I don't feel like the situation that we're in, we have to think outside the box. Okay, and what I'm really saying is, think of your emotions and your thoughts. Think of life as a work of art. So you've got a palette in front of you with different colors, and you've got a paintbrush, and you're constantly using the same colors. And imagine these colors that you're using represent emotions or programs that don't serve you, and you're doing your artwork because your whole life is a work of art. Believe it or not, that's my perception of it.
Yeah.
Now it's time to reprogram or to get rid of those particular palettes of paint, emotional paint that you've been using. Wash it out, okay? And you might not be able to start with be able to get the really high frequency kind of colors, if you want to say, or emotions, but you can do that each time. Get rid of one, bring one in. Get rid of one program or self-limiting belief system to replace it with something positive. So just work on that emotional palette as you go. Before long, your life's going to start changing as you dip your brush and you start creating your life. You will start to notice a change. And because you're traveling so fast, you might not notice, but when you reference to who you were, that's when the aha moment happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really good. And I love that analogy. I've used it many times myself, is life's a work of art. And it's the paints we choose to use that creates the picture, right? So, your work facilitates that. So let's just kind of, we can start to wrap it up here a little bit, John. With your work, share whatever you want in terms of the healing sessions, and then also how can people get in touch with you to facilitate this process for themselves?
Sure, thank you. Well, my business is called Awakening Health Within. I believe that we all have it in us. So that's very important. Listen, folks, I'm going to tell you something. I am not perfect. I'm far from perfect. So you wait till you're perfect to achieve these goals. So just forget about that ideology, because that's not true. Just be who you are. Just add different gifts to you. In regards to getting a hold of me to do any type of sessions, you can find some of my work on YouTube, Awakening Health Within, some of the work that I've done. You can get me on my website, Awakening Health Within. Any questions you have, please contact me. And we basically take it from there. I work from Port Perry from my own studio. I also, especially in a time like this, I do remote work too. Now, I just want to touch on that for a second. You don't know that everything's connected until you've experienced it. I could tell people till the blue in the face that everything is one and everything is connected. But until you've actually experienced it, you don't know. Of course you don't know, because that's a program you've been running in your subconscious, right? So until you, so as the words leave my lips, and it's going to hit some people, and it's going to hit their ears, and they're going to say, John, what are you talking about? Folks, it's something you have to experience. It is true. Now, whether you come to see me for the energy work that I do or someone else, please do your research. It's true. It's 100% true. So if you're sitting home and you feel isolated and you feel like you can't do this or you can't do that, there are people out there, myself or others, that can help you. Now, I can't talk in detail about other people. I can only say for myself, it is real and it does work. And I'm not talking about fluffy stuff. I'm talking about heavy hitting stuff here. And for whatever reason, I seem to reset the body. I'll give you an example. Fertility. I've had great experiences with fertility, huge amounts. I reset the organs, the body, whatever it is, immune systems. If I can do it, you can do it. But start with meditation. If you want me to assist you, you can contact me, Awakening Health Within. Or if you want to work on yourself, please do. You have all the answers you need.
Yeah. Okay. So
Really.
let's unpack that a little bit, because first and foremost, working with a facilitator for this stuff is so essential. If you're new to this, particularly, but if you're experienced it, everyone has their gifts, right? Like I have the gift of communication, organization, connection, networking, etc. Many other gifts. And I've certainly spent quite a bit of time studying energy healing, etc. Not to the same extent that John's done his work by any means. I'm not going to say that it's not a natural gift. I just haven't honed it as well as someone like John. So learning from a mentor, learning from a master, having them work on you is just going to save you time, right? So if you have the financial means to do this stuff, do your research, right? Like, I mean, if you're listening to this right now and this is resonating, then I'd say don't hesitate. You're going to have the links to John's information pretty quick after the broadcast here. I'll post it up. Just reach out to him, have a chat. I highly encourage you to work with him. I firsthand seen him work with my girlfriend Gail, as I said, and she had not had a lot of relief from her pain, and for like an entire hour and a half, she had no pain. And she's worked with some other healers and stuff up to this point, and some of them really great, but that was definitely a marked result with John, and distinctly distinct from the other results she was getting. So I firsthand am saying, like, I think that's why we're doing this. I think John's the real deal. He's obviously done some heavy hitting things as he's described. So I'd encourage you to reach out to someone like John. At the same time, if you're the type of person that likes to do your research, etc., look up 3 or 4 energy healers. When you get into this, if you're new to it, there's tons out there, and not all are created equal. Not everyone's done it as long. Not everyone has the same experience. And also be like conscious of your finances. Just because someone's charging hundreds or thousands of dollars doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be the right person for you. So go on a resonance here. However you like to make decisions. If you're having a challenging time with making a decision about who to go with, reach out to John or myself. We can give you some ideas around how to facilitate that. But I would strongly encourage you, I mean, obviously, the water, program your water, look into that. Program your mind, look into that, dive deeper. If you're already doing a practice, dive in more, right? Like, essentially, if you're not happy all the time, you still have work to do. That's how I look at it, right? If you're not feeling elevated and uplifted and inspired every moment, there's more to clear. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the process of being a human. But again, if you get with someone like John, he's going to facilitate and accelerate that for you. And going back to these bubble realities, we have the option to live in the reality that we choose. And I'm just going to put this out there because I know it's a special audience watching this sort of information. If you're still on the call at this point watching, we are not changing the world. We are shifting our vibration to resonate with a different version of Earth that already exists. So the version of Earth where coronavirus doesn't exist, the version of Earth where everyone's living in peace and harmony, that exists. But it's not about wanting that. It's not about desiring that. It's just about knowing when I elevate my own frequency, I'm more compatible with that. And appreciating the process of elevating yourself to that point. That's really what this is all about. So reach out to John. If you have questions at all, reach out to John, reach out to me, put them in the Facebook, the broadcast here, or private message. You'll also have John's. We'll probably put in your email. We can do your phone number if you're open to that, your website, basically so people can get in touch with you in whatever way is easiest for them. And that pretty well concludes the conversation here. John, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, you have the power. You have the resources. You don't know you have it. Think outside the box. Let the old programs go. And you are so powerful, you don't know. You have no idea how much access. If you can just bottleneck and get through that learning curve, you'd be amazed at what you find. And from my experience, the answer that we're all looking for is just get through that bottleneck and trust that when you get rid of that straw and that perception that you've been led for so many years, when that aperture of possibilities open up, you'll realize how beautiful and incredible a creation each and every individual you are. That's all I've really got to say. So, Matthew, thanks again.
Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure, and thank you all for watching. And we'll see you, we'll probably do future episodes of this because I really enjoyed this with you, John. So I think there's a lot of great information to share with people.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, and just really brief with everyone, I want to share with my girlfriend Gail's situation. We are raising funds for her currently. She's got amidst the coronavirus, she's in the hospital right now. They're just taking away visiting. Today's the last day for visitors for an indefinite amount of time, which is not, the nicest situation for her. She's going to be in physical isolation anyway. But we're also raising funds to help with her medical expenses. In Canada here, we do have some access to public health care, but that's not going to be enough to bring a cure. It's treating some of her symptoms. She's had, like I said, severe pain. She did go through a couple of surgeries to alleviate that. Now she's experiencing different kind of pain after the surgery. But we're also going to be working with a lot of different, and we have been working with different practitioners, getting her on with healthy supplements, healthy food, even meeting her basic living expenses at this point is, something we're working on. Just because of her situation, she's been immobile. She's not going to be able to work for at least a year. So I'm going to post a link explaining her story. She's an amazing person. Once she gets on the other side of this, she's going to be in a space to share and impact others in a really positive way. But, we're looking for community support to really get her there. And it's going to take time. It's also going to take financial resources. So if you have the ability to make any kind of donation, there's a link. If you can share the fundraiser with your network, that would be eternally appreciated. And of course, keeping her in your positive thoughts and prayers. And so thank you for that as well. Okay, we'll sign off here. John, it's been a pleasure, and we'll be doing more of these because I thoroughly enjoyed this. So take care for now, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.